Elm Street had always been quiet. The kind of place where children played barefoot until the sun dipped below the rooftops and porch lights flickered to life. Where the neighbors waved, the lawns were manicured, and secrets stayed buried just beneath the surface. And then she arrived. Her name was Mira Lane, a soft-spoken woman with auburn hair always tied in a messy bun and deep, sleep-starved eyes that gave away more than she ever spoke. She moved into the old weathered house at the corner, the one with ivy crawling up its bricks like it was trying to swallow the place whole. She didn't talk much, didn't attend block parties or parent groups. But what got the town talking wasn't her isolation. It was what she did with her baby. Every morning, at precisely 7:12 a.m., Mira stepped outside holding her infant. But she never cradled the child the way other mothers did. She held the baby upside down. Gently, carefully, with the kind of tenderness you'd expect from a loving mother, but inverted. Her fingers locked securely around the baby's ankles as she softly swayed her back and forth. For 10 minutes, in complete silence, Mira would perform this ritual. Then, just as quietly as she appeared, she'd return indoors. At first, people thought it was a one-time thing. A mistake. Maybe she tripped. Or maybe the baby had a medical condition. But the next morning, and the one after that, she did it again. And again. The whispers began almost immediately. She's unstable. Should someone call child services? Who even does that to a baby? But no one confronted her. They just watched, from behind curtains, from parked cars, from across the street while pretending to water their lawns. It wasn't long before parents in the area started warning their kids to stay away from the Lane house. It became a local urban legend of sorts. They said the baby never cried. Not once. They said Mira never turned on her lights at night. Some even claimed to have seen her speaking to herself in the garden under the moon. But beneath all the rumors was a growing sense of dread. The kind that hums low in your chest when something doesn't feel right. People feared that if they looked too closely, they might discover something they didn't want to know. So they kept their distance. And then came Clara Moreno, the one person who didn't buy into the hysteria. Clara was a pediatric nurse, newly relocated from the city after her fiancé was transferred for work. She wasn't interested in gossip or suburban politics. She believed in facts, in science, and in giving people the benefit of the doubt. When she first heard the murmurs about the upside-down baby woman, she laughed. Seriously? That's what has everyone on edge, she told her fiancé. But curiosity has a way of gripping even the most rational minds. And it wasn't long before Clara found herself at her front window one early morning, coffee in hand, eyes narrowed across the street. And sure enough, there was Mira. Barefoot. Calm. Rocking her baby upside down like she was swaying a branch in the wind. Clara squinted. The baby didn't seem distressed. In fact, the child looked peaceful. Relaxed. Even happy. Clara's professional instincts began to stir. There was something here that didn't match the hysteria. She needed to know more. Clara waited a few days before making her move. She pretended to bump into Mira one morning by the mailbox. The older woman was holding her child upright for once, eyes darting nervously as Clara approached. Hi, Clara offered gently. I'm Clara. I just moved in across the street. Mira nodded, barely lifting her gaze. Mira. They stood in silence for a beat too long. Then Clara, without pretense, said it, I saw you with your baby. You know, outside. Mira flinched. Her arms instinctively wrapped tighter around the infant. I don't mean to pry, Clara continued. I'm actually a pediatric nurse. It just caught my eye. That's all. Another pause. A breath. And then Mira's eyes, those tired, guarded eyes, began to water. I'm not crazy, she whispered. I swear to God. I wouldn't hurt her. I don't think you would, Clara replied calmly. But people talk, don't they? Mira nodded slowly. They don't know what we've been through, what she needs. And with that, she turned and walked back to her home, the screen door creaking softly behind her. Later that evening, Clara sat on her porch thinking. Something about Mira's face haunted her. There was fear, yes, but also fierce, unwavering love. That night, a violent thunderstorm rolled through the neighborhood. Lightning cracked across the sky. Power flickered. Trees bent beneath the screaming wind. And the next morning, the Lane house was quiet. Too quiet. Clara, now uneasy, crossed the street under gray clouds and knocked gently. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. The door, surprisingly, creaked open. "Mira," she called out. Silence. Stepping cautiously inside, Clara's eyes adjusted to the dim light. The house smelled of lavender and baby powder. It was neat. Too neat. Like no one had lived there for weeks. And then she found it, on the kitchen table. A small, leather-bound diary. Its pages were worn, covered in Mira's tight, anxious handwriting. Clara hesitated, then opened it. The first page read, "They say I'm a monster, but they don't know what she's been through. What we've survived. What we're still running from." Clara stood frozen in Mira's kitchen, the diary trembling in her hands. The rain from the night before still clung to her jacket, but the storm outside was nothing compared to the one unraveling within her. The house was silent, eerily so. Not a creak, not a whisper from the baby that usually greeted the dawn with soft coos and upside-down lullabies. Only the ticking of an old wall clock echoed in the room, amplifying every beat of Clara's heart as she flipped to the next page. It started the day she was born. The nurses didn't smile. The doctor wouldn't meet my eyes. They told me she was different. That something had gone wrong. But when I held her, I knew they were wrong. She wasn't broken. She was something else. Something rare. Clara leaned against the counter, the weight of those words hitting her like a punch to the chest. Mira's daughter hadn't been diagnosed with any ordinary condition. It was something unusual. Something the medical world clearly didn't understand. Something Mira had chosen to face alone. She turned the page. They said her nervous system wasn't responding right. That she'd struggle to breathe. That her brain activity didn't follow any predictable pattern. They said she wouldn't survive the week. Clara's eyes widened. She'd heard of cases like this in her early training. Infants born with undetectable neural irregularities that didn't match any textbook diagnosis. Most of them didn't make it. But Mira's child had. But I couldn't accept it. I started researching. Desperate, sleepless. I found a paper, hidden deep in a journal from a university overseas. A study on inverted sensory stimulation. They theorized that holding infants upside down in gentle motion could stimulate dormant neural pathways. It had only been tested on rats. But I had nothing left to lose. Clara read faster now, her hands sweating. I tried it. On the second morning, her eyes followed the light for the first time. On the fourth, she laughed. On the 10th, she reached for me. There were tears on that page. Actual ones, warping the ink into smudged rivers that cut through the lines. She was waking up. She was alive. But no one believed me. The doctors said it was coincidence. That I was hallucinating progress. So I left. I took her away from hospitals. From their sterile judgment. I came here, to start over. Clara closed the book slowly, her mind spinning. Mira wasn't abusing her child. She wasn't performing bizarre rituals for no reason. She was fighting, against every expert, every diagnosis, every whispered doubt, to give her daughter a chance at life. And now, she was gone. Later that day, the whispers in the neighborhood reached a fever pitch. The Lane house is empty. She ran off in the night. Maybe she knew they were going to take the baby away. Clara couldn't take it anymore. She stepped out onto her porch and raised her voice. She didn't run. And she's not a danger to her child. Everyone stopped. She was saving her. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But Clara didn't care. She'd seen enough in that diary to know the truth. Mira had sacrificed everything for her daughter. Her reputation, her safety, her sense of belonging. And now she was gone, probably terrified, hiding somewhere from the world that had only ever judged her. That night, Clara stayed up with the diary, combing every page for clues. One entry caught her eye. If it ever gets too loud again, if I start to feel the stairs closing in, there's one place left. The cabin in Sycamore Woods. My grandfather's old place. They'll never find us there. Clara's fingers gripped the book tightly. She knew Sycamore Woods. It was nearly an hour's drive out of town, tucked beyond the hills where the forest grew wild and unwelcoming. She didn't hesitate. By sunrise, she had packed a bag, brought formula and blankets, and was behind the wheel. The road twisted like a snake, narrow and uneven, framed by trees that clawed at the sky like they were trying to shut out the sun. When she finally reached the end of the gravel path, she saw it, a weathered cabin, barely visible through the fog and thickets. Smoke curled lazily from a chimney. Someone was inside. Clara approached slowly, her shoes crunching over the gravel. She knocked softly. No answer. Mira, she called. It's Clara. Please. I read your journal. I understand. Silence. Then, a baby's soft whimper from inside. The door creaked open an inch. Mira's face peeked through, pale and puffy, her eyes rimmed with red. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. They'll follow you. They'll take her away from me. Clara stepped forward, her voice low and calm. They won't. Not if we do this the right way. I know people. I can help you. Mira hesitated, trembling. She smiled this morning, she whispered. I woke up, and she smiled at me for the first time. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. She nodded slowly. I believe you. The door opened fully. Inside, the cabin was sparse but warm. The baby lay in a handmade cradle, cooing softly. She looked healthier than Clara had expected. Pink cheeks, alert eyes, tiny fists waving in the air. Clara knelt beside her, her voice a whisper. You're a fighter, aren't you? Mira stood behind her, hands clenched. Do you think they'll understand? She asked. Clara looked up. They don't have to. But I do. And I'm not going to let them take her from you. The cabin was quiet, but Clara could feel the tension beneath the silence. Like the air before a thunderstorm, still but trembling with electricity. Mira sat at the edge of the makeshift cot, her baby nestled in her arms, rocking her gently with that same inverted motion that had drawn so much fear and judgment. Clara watched the child's tiny eyes follow the movement. There was no sign of distress. Only trust. I don't want to hide anymore, Mira whispered. Her voice was raw, like it hadn't been used in weeks. But if I step back into that town, they'll call me crazy. They'll take her. Clara sat across from her, hands clasped tight on her knees. Not if we show them what she can do. You said she smiled this morning. That's something we can document. We'll do it on your terms. But this needs to be recorded, Mira. Proof. Not just words in a diary. Mira looked down at her daughter, her lips trembling. She's come so far. Every doctor told me she wouldn't make it out of the hospital. But look at her. Look at her. Clara leaned closer, her voice soft and even. I believe you. I've worked in pediatric ICUs, Mira. I've seen the charts. The numbers. But I've also seen what love can do when medicine gives up. This, she gestured to the baby, who was now gripping Mira's fingers, this matters. Let's show them. Over the next few days, Clara stayed with Mira in the cabin, keeping low, off the grid. Mira allowed Clara to document their routines, every gentle movement, every reaction from the baby, every giggle, grasp, eye trace, and coo. Clara kept meticulous notes and recorded videos with her phone. Not as a journalist or a voyeur, but as a nurse. As a witness. Mira even showed Clara a folder of old medical documents. Neonatal EEGs. Brain scans. Progress reports. Clara pored over them for hours. There was one phrase that kept appearing, non-responsive to external stimuli. And yet, here she was. Smiling. Reacting. Gripping a rattle with surprising strength. Laughing when Mira made clicking sounds with her tongue. Something had changed. Something real. But truth isn't always enough to protect you. It was the fourth night when Clara stepped outside to get reception and call an old friend, Dr. Layton, a developmental neurologist she trusted. She needed a second opinion, someone who wouldn't dismiss what Mira had achieved. The conversation was brief. "You're telling me this baby, diagnosed as non-viable, now shows sensory awareness?" Leighton asked, skeptical but intrigued. "I have it all on video," Clara replied. "And I think her therapy, if you can even call it that, is what's made the difference." Leighton was quiet for a long moment. "Bring her in. I'll look. But be careful, Clara. If the wrong people get involved, they won't see progress. They'll see danger." Clara hung up with a pit in her stomach. When she returned inside, Mira was waiting. "You called someone," she said flatly. Clara didn't lie. "Yes. Someone I trust. Someone who can help you." Mira's eyes narrowed. "I've heard that before. From social workers. From doctors. From the people who said they knew best." Clara stepped forward slowly. "I didn't come here to betray you. But hiding isn't going to save her forever. If we don't control the narrative, someone else will." Mira looked down at her child, who was now asleep, clutching a threadbare stuffed rabbit. "I just wanted to keep her safe," she whispered. The next morning, they heard the sound, gravel crunching under tires. A car was approaching. Clara rushed to the window. A dark sedan. Mira's face drained of color. "It's them." "No," Clara said, shaking her head. No one else knew. Before she could finish, there was a knock at the door. A calm, deliberate knock. Clara opened it slowly. Standing there was Dr. Leighton. "I came myself," he said simply. "If what you said is true, I needed to see it with my own eyes." Behind him, no police cars. No child services. Just him. A man who had seen thousands of children, but never one like Mira's daughter. In the cabin's dim light, Leighton watched as Mira performed the same routine she did every morning. The inverted sway. The rhythmic, careful rocking. The baby didn't flinch. Didn't cry. Instead, she reached upward, eyes tracking Leighton's movements as he circled around. After several minutes, Leighton sat back, stunned. "I need a moment," he murmured, stepping outside. Clara followed him. "Well, she shouldn't be responding like that. Not based on these files." The brain activity markers from her initial EEG showed near flatline. "But this, Clara, she's awake. She's learning." Clara smiled grimly. "Told you." "But that therapy," Leighton added, "what Mira's doing, it's not science." Clara's voice was sharp. "Maybe not yet, but it's working." He hesitated, then nodded. "You said you had recordings." "All of it." "Then let's publish this. Carefully. With control." Mira was hesitant at first, but Clara explained the plan. Release the findings under Leighton's name, anonymized. No location. No names. Just data, video, and results. Reluctantly, Mira agreed. "I want people to know," she said quietly. "Not for me. For the other mothers who've been told to give up." And so they did. Over the next few days, Leighton, Clara, and Mira worked together to build a report that would shake the pediatric world. And then, it went public. The article dropped on a reputable medical forum under the headline, "Emerging Evidence for Inverted Neural Stimulation in High-Risk Infants." The response was immediate. Some scientists called it nonsense. Others demanded more data. But buried in the outrage were stories. Emails. Dozens of them. From parents. Mothers and fathers who saw pieces of Mira's child in their own. Who wanted to learn. Who believed. But as the whispers of hope grew, so did the attention. News stations came sniffing. Medical boards demanded an inquiry. And Clara began to fear the very thing Mira had always tried to escape. Exposure. The article spread like wildfire. First on niche medical forums, then into the broader public. Podcasts debated its ethics. News anchors asked, "Is this the future of pediatric care or dangerous pseudoscience?" But underneath the noise, one thing was clear. People were watching. For Mira, Every headline felt like a knife twisting. Not because they were accusing her, but because they were talking about her. Talking about her child. And then the worst happened. One morning, Clara stepped outside to get firewood and found a crumpled envelope nailed to a tree near the cabin. No name. No postage. Just 3 words scribbled in black marker. I found you. Clara rushed inside, pale and shaking. Mira looked up immediately, sensing the panic in her eyes. What is it? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Clara handed her the note without saying a word. The moment Mira read it, her hands began to tremble. The blood drained from her face, and she slowly sank to the floor. It's him, she whispered. Clara's voice was cautious. Who? My ex. The baby's father. Clara had never asked about him. She assumed he wasn't in the picture, but now she realized the truth was much darker. Mira stared blankly ahead. He was the first person who said I was crazy. When she was born, he told me to leave her at the hospital, to sign the papers and let the state take over. When I refused, he tried to have me declared unfit. Clara sat beside her. You never mentioned him before. I was trying to pretend he didn't exist, Mira admitted. But he's back. And now that people are talking about us, he'll want to take her. Clara didn't hesitate. No one is taking your child. Despite Leighton's best efforts to keep the case anonymous, the internet had a way of digging. A popular parenting blog connected dots between public medical records, old news clippings, and even Mira's high school social media. It wasn't long before Mira's full name, and her child's, were plastered across the web. A headline on a major tabloid screamed, "Mother who held baby upside down identified, state investigation underway." Within 48 hours, a court order was filed. Child Protective Services was coming. Clara sat on the porch steps that evening, watching the sun dip below the trees, her phone clenched tightly in her hand. Leighton had done what he could to delay the process, but the state's interest had turned into a mandate. They wanted a wellness check. Immediately. Inside, Mira was packing a small bag, formula, diapers, the old stuffed rabbit. Where are you going? Clara asked. Mira didn't answer at first. Her hands were shaking. Somewhere far, she finally said. She's all I have. Clara stepped forward. Running now makes you look guilty. We have proof. We have a doctor on your side. You don't understand, Mira whispered. They don't care about proof. They care about control. That night, a car pulled into the clearing again. But this time it wasn't Leighton or reporters. It was him. Mira froze when she saw the tall figure step from the car, dressed in a sharp gray suit, carrying nothing but a briefcase and a look of pure confidence. Her ex. Clara stepped in front of the door instinctively. Can I help you? She asked, her tone icy. I'm here to collect my daughter, he replied. His voice was oily, controlled, rehearsed. Like a man who knew how to charm judges and twist stories. You abandoned her, Mira said, stepping out behind Clara. Her voice was louder than it had been in weeks. You told me to leave her to die. I told you to be realistic, he snapped. And instead, you hid her in the woods like some kind of science experiment. Don't worry. I have the court on my side. He held up a document. A temporary custody order. Clara snatched it, scanning it quickly. It was valid. But something didn't feel right. I'm calling Dr. Leighton, Clara said. He needs to see this. Her ex smirked. Call whoever you want. But tomorrow morning, I'll be back, with law enforcement. And I suggest you make this easy. He turned and left. Mira's breath hitched. They'll believe him. He has money. Connections. Then we don't wait, Clara said. Clara called Leighton immediately and explained what had happened. He didn't hesitate. Do the interview, he said. Right now. With both of you. Get ahead of the narrative. Within hours, a well-known investigative journalist arrived. Someone Leighton trusted. Someone who had built a reputation on exposing flawed systems and protecting vulnerable voices. They sat down by candlelight, cameras rolling, and Mira told her story. All of it. The hospital. The diagnosis. The pressure to institutionalize. The isolation. The desperate research. The strange connection her child had with inverted movement. The ridicule. The fear. The escape. Clara added her perspective, her credentials, her professional assessment, the evidence she had witnessed with her own eyes. It was raw, painful, but it was real. The interview aired the next evening. It wasn't flashy. No dramatic music or manipulative editing. Just truth, told plainly. And the world responded. Tens of thousands of comments poured in, some skeptical, but most supportive. Mothers, nurses, therapists, people who had seen the impossible happen in their own children. One comment stood out. She didn't fail her child. She saved her. Maybe it's time we listened instead of judged. The courtroom was ice cold, despite the rising tension inside. The pale fluorescent lights hummed above rows of wooden benches, each filled with a mixture of curious strangers, journalists, and a few familiar faces. Cameras weren't allowed, but everyone knew this trial would echo far beyond these walls. Mira sat at the front, her baby cradled in her arms, wrapped in a soft pink blanket. Clara was beside her, her posture rigid, her jaw clenched. Across the aisle sat Mira's ex, crisp suit, confident smile, eyes locked on the judge like he already knew the outcome. He didn't look at the baby. Not once. The case was simple on paper. Was Mira an unfit mother? Was the child in danger under her care? But in reality, it was anything but simple. The opposing counsel painted Mira as unstable. They cited her decision to leave the hospital system, her withdrawal from traditional therapy, her isolation. They even played a short, cherry-picked clip of her rocking the baby upside down, without context, without emotion. She claims to have invented her own form of therapy, the attorney said smugly. With no medical training, no licensure, and no oversight. That is not parenting. That is delusion. Mira stared ahead, stone-faced. Then it was Clara's turn to testify. Clara spoke clearly and passionately. She laid out her credentials, her years in pediatric neurology, her history with severely impaired children. She explained how, when she first saw the baby, she expected the worst. But what she witnessed instead was progress. Real, measurable development. She detailed the videos, the reactions, the smiles, the tracking of movement. This child is not neglected, Clara said, turning toward the judge. She's bonded. Healthy. Curious. Her mother didn't abandon her. She fought for her when no one else would. The room was silent. Then, Dr. Layton was called to testify. Layton, polished and respected, provided the bridge between Mira's intuition and medical credibility. She created a sensory stimulus that bypassed the baby's underdeveloped frontal systems and engaged the vestibular pathways, he explained. It's unconventional, yes, but the results are undeniable. He handed the judge a file, brain activity comparisons, video transcripts, progress logs. The judge flipped through the pages slowly. She didn't speak, but her eyes lingered on the photos. One of them showed Mira's daughter, upside down, giggling. Layton's voice dropped to a quiet murmur. Sometimes, we miss the miracle because it doesn't come in the form we expect. Finally, Mira was called to speak. She stood up slowly, her arms trembling, not from fear, but from the crushing weight of everything she had carried for so long. I was told my baby wouldn't live, she began, voice raw. They said she wouldn't smile, wouldn't see, wouldn't connect. And when I refused to let go, they called me unstable. She glanced at the opposing attorney, then back at the judge. But I saw her. I saw something no one else did. Not in machines. Not in charts. I saw her try. And I didn't give up. She stepped forward, cradling her daughter gently. I don't know the names for what I do. I'm not a scientist. But I know my child. I know her rhythms, her breath, her joy. I know what makes her laugh. I've held her every night since she was born. And I've watched her come alive, little by little. A pause. And if loving your child fiercely, desperately, fully, If that's wrong, then I don't want to be right. The judge was quiet for a long time after everyone's Saturday. The whole courtroom held its breath. Then she spoke. This is not a typical case. The law often seeks certainty, but in this situation, certainty is not available. What is available is a child who is alive, loved, and, by all accounts, thriving in ways no one predicted. She turned to Mira. You were judged harshly, not just by the law, but by a society that often fears what it doesn't understand. That fear led to assumptions. And those assumptions nearly cost your daughter her future. Then, looking directly at the ex, she added, and while biology may grant rights, it does not grant understanding, nor love. The courtroom held still. I see no evidence that the child is in danger. On the contrary, I see a mother who defied the odds to give her daughter a chance. This court denies the motion for custody transfer. The child remains with her mother. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Mira burst into tears, holding her daughter close. Clara exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. And across the aisle, Mira's ex sat in stunned silence, his confidence crumbling. It was over. The story made national headlines again. But this time, Mira wasn't a cautionary tale. She was a pioneer. Parents from all over the world reached out. Some criticized. Some begged for answers. But many, many more, offered support, shared their own stories, and thanked Mira for not staying silent. Eventually, with Leighton's help, Mira began working with a team of therapists and researchers to further study the methods she'd instinctively created. She didn't want fame. She wanted to help. To give others the same hope she once clung to in the dark. As for her daughter, she kept growing. Thriving. One morning, Clara returned to visit and found the little girl standing, shaky, but upright, gripping the edge of a worn-out bookshelf. She turned, saw Clara, and smiled. It was the same smile Clara had seen in that cabin. Only now it was brighter, stronger, alive. Everyone judged her parenting. They called her unstable, dangerous, delusional. But no one asked why she did it. No one asked what she saw. Until now. And the truth? The truth left everyone